Hi everyone, and welcome to Kids Tech Learning Academy. My name is Mr. John, and in this series of videos, I'm going to be briefly going over each of the classes in your class guide. Also, I'm going to be trying to tweak your curiosity a bit just to make sure that you read each of those classes, because I know that there's some very interesting stuff in there, and I think you'll enjoy a lot of it. To begin with, class number 1 is entitled The Road to Science and Engineering. Now, first of all, what do you think I mean by the road to science and engineering? In other words, what puts people on that particular path to become a scientist or an engineer? And also, what kinds of traits do they tend to have that makes them a successful scientist or engineer? Well, that's one of the things you'll be learning about in class number 1. I'll tell you right now that one of the key things is curiosity. If you don't have curiosity about the way things work, then that science or engineering is probably not the direction you should be heading in. Now, besides that, you're going to get a chance to learn about things called experiments. In fact, by the time you've completed all the classes, you're going to hear the word experiments over and over again, so you'll have a pretty good feel for what experiments are. But in class number 1, you'll get a chance to perform an experiment that actually, in a different form, was used to disprove something that had been thought to be true for over 2,000 years. And basically, it concerns the way gravity works. We know that if we drop a heavy object and a lighter object, that if we drop them from the same height and at the same time, well, they're going to both fall down. In fact, let me know if you ever find out otherwise, because then you're probably in a different universe than I am. But we know that they'll fall towards the center of the earth. The question of which one will hit the ground first came up around 2,400 years ago and was put to a very, very smart man by the name of Archimedes. Turns out Archimedes was a bit of a genius. In fact, if you want, you can think of him as Albert Einstein in a toga. And Archimedes was asked the question of which object hits the ground first, a heavy one or a light one, when they're dropped from the same height and at the same time. Archimedes said it's obvious. It's going to be the heavy one. And all you have to do is just do a thought experiment, basically using your brain to kind of think through the question, and think about what happens when you drop a rock and a feather. Well, the rock hits the ground before the feather does. But besides that, doing that thought experiment, Archimedes never actually did a real experiment to see what the answer to that question might be. It wasn't until about 2,000 years later that someone actually did a real experiment, and what they discovered was that, wow, Archimedes was actually wrong in what he thought. But you can imagine that for 2,000 years, no one questioned what Archimedes had said, simply because he was a very, very well-respected scientist, and no one had ever actually tried doing an experiment to disprove or prove what he said. So that's kind of one of the interesting things I think you'll find in class number 1. Now, in class number 1, you're going to get a chance to build a car called Elastocar. Elastocar is a design I came up with to show that you can actually power a car with something more than gravity to make it move. We all know that if we put a car at the top of a hill, that let it go and then it will roll down the hill because gravity is pulling on it. But what I wanted to do was use a different kind of force to make this particular car move. So I came up with the idea of using a rubber band. And this is the power source for Elastocar. Well, you can see that it can act as a power source because when I pull to stretch it, it's actually pulling on me back to try and return to its original shape. That's called elasticity. When something can change its shape and then go back to its original shape, once forces are taken off of it, that's something that's elastic. Well, let me show you the experiment that you're going to be doing in class number 1 to maybe learn a little bit more about the kind of laws of nature that govern how a rubber band behaves. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and lower this a little bit so you can get a better view of Elastocar. Okay, there we go. So this is what Elastocar should look like after you've gotten done building it. If you find that your Elastocar and this Elastocar look different in some way, meaning that it's either using different parts or the parts are put together differently, go back and check your build instructions, because that means you got a mistake in the way you built the car. If this car looks like the one that you've built, now we can talk about experiment number 1, where you attach this rubber band to the car. And the way you attach it is to use this hole and go ahead and push the end of the rubber band through there. And then what you do is you loop this part of the rubber band around the pin. Once you've done that, what you're going to do is you're going to loop the other end of the rubber band around this piece of your model. But what I want you to do is I want you to have that pointing down and then loop this part of the rubber band around it. Now for the experiments, once you've connected your rubber band that way, for the experiments it talks about making one complete wheel turn to wrap the rubber band one time around this particular piece of your model. What that means is that you need to turn these wheels backwards, and now I'm halfway around. You see this is pointing up now, and keep turning them until it's pointing back down again. That's one complete turn. And once you've made that one complete turn, you can set your car down and let it go, and then find out how far it travels. And then once you've done that 3 times, each time you want to make sure you're recording the information in your experimental data sheet. Now the next experiment is, instead of just wrapping it one time around there, wrap it 2 times around there. What that really does is it ends up stretching the rubber band twice as much as it was stretched before. And then you set the car down, let it go, find out how far it travels, and then put that information into your experimental data sheet also. The final experiment involves connecting the rubber band a little differently. So instead of having this loop around this pin, you kind of disconnect that, take both the loops, and with that ball piece pointing down, you take both the loops and wrap it around the ball piece, just like that. And then you're going to again do one complete turn of stretching both those parts of the rubber band, putting the car down and then seeing how far it goes, and then putting that into your data sheet. So I just wanted to point that out, that that's the way you're connecting the rubber band and using the rubber band for the 3 experiments that you'll be doing in your class number 1. Once you've done all that, feel free to just have some fun with your car. You can try different ways of hooking up the rubber bands. You can try different things in terms of how far you stretch the rubber bands. On top of that, you see there's a gear here and a gear there. You can try switching those, putting the big gear there and the small gear there, and then see what happens. On top of that, if you want to change the look of your car, well, you've got lots of pieces in your kit, so maybe you can make your car look like a really cool hot rod. Maybe you can make it look like some kind of a missile car. There's a lot of possibilities that you can do with the parts that you have left in your kit. So feel free to, go ahead and change the car how you like it. And if you think you've got a really cool design that you'd like to share with other people, feel free to have your parents email me a picture of the car that you have, and we're going to be posting those pictures up on our Facebook page periodically. So I hope you have fun with class number 1, and I look forward to talking to you in class number 2.